Hey yogi friends, Kit Kat here. Today we are going to work into Garudasana. In Sanskrit, Garudasana translates into eagle pose. So this is a full body bind. It's a little bit of a challenging shape, I'm not going to fib, but don't run away from it. It's going to be a-okay. What we're going to do is bind the arms, we're going to bind the legs, we're going to find a little bit of a back bend and balance on one leg all at the same time. You're like, oh, I'm out. Let me break it down for you so that I can make it a little bit easier. In order to achieve this quite challenging pose, takes a little bit of focus and concentration. So steady gaze, steady balance. So if you're falling all over the shop, I want you to pick one little target spot on the floor and focus on that. So if you steady your gaze, you're going to come into focus and bring this balance to being. The next tip is to split the shape in half. And I don't mean a magic trick and cut you off at the waist, but work on the legs and finding the bind in the legs and finding your steady balance. And then once you've established that base shape, add the arms into the bind. So then you've got the upper body and the lower body working together. In order to execute the bind in the upper body, you can actually do that in a supine position. So you can work on it in seated here. So just as an example, I'm going to take the Garudasana bind, arms out to the side, wrapping the left arm underneath the right, twisting until I find prayer pose. So I'm eventually going to bring my fingertips underneath my nose, so that's going to activate the core a little and open up into the scapula. So if you can't find this bind, stress not, my friends. Just give yourselves a big loving hug. That can be your first port of call. If this is super challenging, grab hold of each opposite elbow, and then as you go to change the shape into the other side, grab hold of the other elbow or give yourself a hug in the other direction. Gradually what's going to happen is you'll open up into the shoulders and open up into the back body through the scapula, find a loosening of joints into the elbows. This pose, this shape is really beautiful if you do a load of desk work, opening you up and loosening up through the neck and shoulders. It's quite a wonderful release. So arms crossed, hugging, finding the bind, backs of the palms together, and then eventually fronts of the palms together, looking at your alignment, and do this in front of the bathroom mirror, because bathroom mirrors tend to be the right height to see where your alignment is for Garudasana. It's the perfect place, right? I'm going to brush my teeth. No, I'm going to do Garudasana. And then eventually you can, if you're still struggling in that space or working through that space, grab hold of the thumb and start to work that lower elbow down, and eventually the hands, palms will journey towards each other. I've still got about another, at this point in time today, I've got about another 1.5 inches to go for the tips of my fingers to meet. It's all a work in progress. Today is 1.5 inches, tomorrow might be more or less. It is what it is on the day. So, important things warming up as you go into Garudasana, because you do have quite the bind in the knee, a bind in the lower body and in the legs. Important to warm up the knees and the hips, so sun salutations A and B. And in particular, one of our all-time favorite poses, chair pose, awkward pose, or Utkatasana, is a really fabulous warm-up for Garudasana. So let's have a look at how to get into this super fun shape. I'm going to come from Tadasana, and I'm going to start with that Utkatasana shape. So finding that bend into the knees, drawing the belly into the spine. I'm going to turn side on here. So drawing the belly in towards the spine and finding a little bit of length in the back body to start. And you can drop that chair pose down as far as you can go, working the heels to the ground, drawing the belly into the spine and finding a little bit more length in the back body. So first port of call, hands coming into the waist. I'm going to draw my right knee up towards my chest in this shape. So I'm finding my balance here, steady gaze. I'm gazing on some holes in the wall. And then I'm going to take my right leg across my left and attempt to not fall over while I'm talking, but wrap my toes around the back of my ankle. So this is the base legs for Garudasana. So if I turn front on, I'm going to come into Utkatasana chair pose. So dropping the hips, bending the knees, keeping the heels on the ground, drawing the belly into the spine so I create a little length in the back body. As I inhale, knee comes up towards the chest, finding that steady gaze for your steady balance. Cross the leg over and wrap the foot around. So there we have the base structure for our Garudasana, coming out the same way we went in. So you might not have that full bind happening in the legs yet. So a couple of tips getting into this shape. Drop down your Utkatasana, and the more times you do this and become familiar with this shape, the easier the access to Garudasana is going to be. So keep the hands on the hips, find your one point of focus to steady your gaze, and then start to work the balance. So finding your balance here, drawing that knee up into the chest. This is where you need that activation of the core that we've been working on for the past few tutorials. And then the higher that knee is up over the top of the thigh, the easier it's going to be to find that wrap and bind and bring the hips back to square. So if you cannot wrap the leg all the way around, I don't want you to freak out totally here, because it is a challenging posture that it's going to require some work. So steady gaze, steady balance, and find this as your first port of call. Lift the knee up into the chest, and maybe you're just going to rest here for the day. Not the whole day, just 3 to 5 breaths is going to do it. Then, as you start to open up into the shape, you're going to be able to stay a little bit longer, dropping down into chair pose, belly to spine, lifting that left knee up and over, and finding the compression. So the back of the left thigh into the top of that right quad. And eventually that's going to be able to get you the bind. So all fun and games while I'm talking to you, while I'm showing you this shape. So I'm going to come back to my right leg, bending into Utkatasana, drawing the right knee up into the chest, crossing it over, squeezing my right hamstring into my quadricep, and eventually finding the bind on this side. Then eventually dropping the hips a little lower, lifting the shoulders, and coming out when we're ready. So how do we add the arms into this shape? And everything as we move into Garudasana happens simultaneously. So as we start to bend the knees, we're going to lift the arms up and over the head. As we inhale and lift the knee, crossing over, the right arm is going to go over the top of the left. And there we find the bind, our Garudasana. Drawing the belly into the spine, you're going to sink the hips a little bit lower, and that's automatically going to force a bit of a back bend here. And you can draw the elbows a little lower, sink the hips a little bit lower, and eventually find your way out. I like to inhale, take the arms up and over the head, press the hands palms, and then we're going to come back into the other side as we float the arms down, bending into the knees, finding that Utkatasana. Left knee comes up and over, and as you go to find the wrap, the right arm comes underneath, and you find your balance in Garudasana. Squaring of the hips, and eventually coming all the way back out. Floating up, and you can see how those arms imitate the actions of an eagle. So that does seem like quite a challenging shape, and it is. You can play in this space for very long periods of time, but it's one of those shapes that if you keep coming back to it and keep coming back to it, you're going to find, obviously it's going to be easier to get into if you're working in that space. But working through sun salutations, particularly sun salutation B, where you have Utkatasana and your warrior one shape, is going to help you get a little bit deeper into the pose. You're going to make those joints in the knees and the hips and the opening up in the ankles even as you take that deep bend through your Utkatasana to access Garudasana. Is going to help open up the body and to make this shape more accessible. So my best advice is when you are going to attempt or challenge yourself with Garudasana is don't do it cold. Make sure you're coming into the shape after a little bit of warm up. What happens is that as we fully bind the body, we're actually cutting off blood flow. So I mean, we're not stopping everything, but you're actually restricting blood flow to certain areas of the body. And what happens is when you release that, fresh oxygenated blood. So as you're in the shape, you're taking your steady inhale and exhale and finding that connection to breath in the space. So as you release that bind, all that fresh oxygenated blood that you've created during the hold and the breathing of that shape rushes back into those spaces in the body that have been in the bind. So it can be a particularly refreshing shape to explore as well. So coming up next, I am going to incorporate our shapes from this week, which is triangle, revolved triangle and Garudasana into a little mini flow for you. So I look forward to seeing you in that class. Have a fantastic day, yogis. Namaste.